Thank you to the Immigrant Learning Center and everybody for joining um, the conference in these 2 days and for joining my presentation today. So I'll just go over what we're going to be doing for the next 50 minutes or so. I am just going to introduce everybody to the Tenement Museum and what we do. And I would love to hear in the chat if any of you have ever visited the museum before or have used any of our resources before, just to get a sense of what your knowledge is of the Tenement Museum. And I'm going to kind of give you 2 mini little virtual tours to learn about 2 different families that we tell the stories of. That I hope you enjoy as individuals, but also to give you an idea of what a virtual field trip would be like. I'll show you a little bit about, our overall virtual field trip program for students, and especially our programming for students who are learning English called the Shared Journeys program. Then I'll also share with you some of our lesson plans and resources. And then we'll do a bit of an activity where we'll use one of our virtual projects called the Your Story, Our Story project. Many of you may have looked through this project in preparation for this workshop. Maybe you even thought of an object that represents your story and submitted that story to it as well. So we'll spend some time looking at that project and thinking about the stories and how it might relate to your instruction and to the communities that you work with. So let me just see, I'm seeing here that a few people have visited before on a school field trip. Great. And good to know that it's also new to you. Walk by a couple times. Yeah, a lot of people walk by and don't even know that we're a museum because we're just basically look like the rest of the neighborhood in the Lower East Side of New York City. Thank you all so much for sharing your experiences with the museum. So let me just share a little bit more. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, so this building that you're looking at here, this is 97 Orchard. This is one of the tenements where we tell stories of real families that lived and made their homes in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And this building was built in 1863 and it was closed in 1935. And in that time, over 7,000 people lived in this building and they represented 20 different countries. So they were about 100% immigrants or the children of immigrants that lived in this building. And so this is one of the buildings where we tell stories, and we also tell them in this building too, which is on the same block. This is 103 Orchard. If you're looking at the building on the left here, I'll explain the other images in a bit. But in this building, people lived also in here from about the 1880s, but we tell stories from a later period from the 1950s until the 2010s. So we try to cover a wide range of time for the Lower East Side history, and also, make connections to the different experiences in different time periods. So our method is to tell history through these stories of real families. Oftentimes, we know about history through dates or through individuals who made sort of these significant contributions, but we really try to democratize history in a way by thinking about it as the individual choices and the challenges that ordinary people face. So I'll start by telling you a little bit about one of those ordinary families that we tell the story of, the Rokushevsky family. So I'm going to reach back into the past a bit for this one. And the Rokushevsky family lived in 97 Orchard, this tenement building, from about 1907 to the time it closed. And they immigrated to the US from Lithuania in 1901. This is a picture of the mom in this family, Fanny Rokushevsky, and the dad in this family. This is Abraham Rokushevsky. And they lived on the 3rd floor of 97 Orchard. So if you were actually to come to the Tenement Museum, you would go inside this door and would take you up to the steps and show you their recreated apartments. But virtually, I'm going to use some 360-degree video to show you a little bit around their apartments. So if we were to do this program with students, I would go much more in depth, but we would also use this 360-degree video. And here we are in the kitchen of the Rokushevsky apartments. You can see that they have a green painted wall, a coal stove with a gas range on top. And oftentimes people will ask, well, what really is a tenement? And actually a tenement is any building where more than 3 unrelated families live. So it's another name for an apartment building, even though we associate lots of things with them like crowded spaces and poor living conditions. They're really just homes. And so we try to emphasize that too. So you can see that they've decorated their home in all these ways with paintings on the walls and again, that sort of seafoam color. But it was a crowded space too. There were 8 people living in this apartment. Fanny and Abraham had 6 children. So the 2 teenage daughters shared this bed here in the kitchen. Let's take this around a bit more. You can see the sink and the basin here. They did have running water, which came in 1905. Gas meter here to put a quarter in to turn on the gas in the apartments. And I'll show you a little around their bedroom. So Fanny and Abraham would have shared the bedroom. The apartment in total is 3 rooms, 325 square feet. A window looks out into the air shift, so you could hear and smell your neighbor's apartments, and but you also get a little bit of fresh air through here. You see the light here, there's gas lighting in the apartments. I'll go back out into the kitchen to get to the living room. And here we see that the table in the living room or the parlor is set for Shabbat dinner. So the Rokushevskys were a Jewish family, and probably part of why they left Europe was because it was unsafe for them to practice their religion. They were being discriminated and oppressed as being Jewish, not able to get work. So they definitely were seeking economic opportunity as well. And so we can think about this side of the table as a really important site for them to connect to their religion and their traditions here. So there would have been a lot of pressure on the family to work. In fact, 4 out of the 8 family members worked in the garment industry. So their teenagers were working, right? We can also imagine their lives. They have some dime novels here on the table that they might have liked to read. Perhaps one of them made a hat like this one that's hanging up here. You can see the bright red wallpaper in the apartment. We actually did analysis of the wallpapers to know that that's what their apartment looked like. And then here's the couch. This is where the 4 boys in this family slept, Morris, Sam, Henry, and Philip. They placed their heads on this couch and extend their legs out. So that's a bit of a look. That's a look around the apartment here. In the end, the Rokushevskys, right, they lived here. The mom in this family, Fanny, she lived here until 1941. So most people did move out in 1935, but this was one of the last, she was one of the last people to live in this building. And again, through this story in this program, we really think about the complexities of sort of making it in a new country, what people end up giving up, what compromises they make, the work of preserving culture, and the challenges to that. So lots of opportunities to make connections to the present day as well. And now I want to talk a little bit about the Wong family, who are still alive, unlike the people who are the focus of the Rokushevskys, of course, their descendants are still with us and often participate in the storytelling and visit the museum. But the Wong family, the mother and father in this family moved to New York City in 1965. Let me show you a photo of the family taken in 1967. This is Mrs. Wong, the mother, okay, and three of her children. Yat Ping is the oldest. Allison is here with the red shoes. And Tony, she's holding. Eventually, she has one more too, Kevin. So they're a family of 6 people that live on Orchard Street. And they actually had a much bigger apartment. We've just created one room of their apartment for the sake of the exhibit. I can show you the floor plan here. It actually is 2 bedrooms with a kitchen, a dining room, a living room. So it's not the more traditional definition of tenement, it's the actual definition. It's a home, it's almost 1,000 square feet. Okay. And you can go inside to see a little bit of what their bedroom looked like. Now, the children in this family, their memories are that their apartment was always a mess. They were really busy, so they insisted that when we recreated it, that we'd leave the beds unmade. And this is a picture on the left of Mrs. Wong and Yat Ping. So they immigrated from Hong Kong in 1965. And Mrs. Wong originally, though, is from the Taishan area of China, which is outlined in red here on the map. She had a childhood where she worked on a farm and she meets her husband and they migrate to Hong Kong. And from there, they immigrate to the United States. So 1965 is a really important year for immigration. As many of you may know, we have the passage of the Hart-Celler Act, which is going to end almost a century of restrictive legislation towards Chinese people and Asian people, starting with the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act and then being expanded in 1917 with the Asiatic Bar Zone. So when the Wong family comes, though there had always been a Chinatown in New York City, they are really coming at a time when it's growing and are participating in its growth and building that community. So a wonderful thing about telling stories about families who are still with us is that they can be very active in telling their own stories. So I want to play a video here where Allison, her daughter, Mrs. Wong, and Yat Ping are going to share sort of their memories of the journey here, or what they heard about their journey here to the United States.
My mom came to the United States in 1965. She wanted a better life for her kids.
帶我個女啊，一冰啊嚟啊，仲有一方啊，啱啱出咗世嘅時啊，係啊，因為我拎咗好重啊嘛，嗰陣時啊，又孭一次我方啦，又有啲碗啦，又有個影相機啊，我又孭一次啊，咁啊，有好多月餅啊，嗰陣時啊8月15咯，咁咧就我哎呀重得滯咯，好似人俾個電飯煲好攝下，又有啲碗啊好重啊，總之好重啊！我同我女講，我有得重得滯咯，我唔拎咯，掉咗佢咯。身邊我女佢話：媽咪啊，等我拎啦，唔好掉。
We came from Hong Kong on an airplane, and it was, it was a bit of a shock, I guess, to come to a place that was all Chinese back in Hong Kong where I grew up, and then to a place now there are like people with strange looking faces, and to a new apartment and new school. And so there was a lot of adjustment for me to come.
So I'd love to hear in the chat if anyone has any thoughts or anything resonates with them that was shared in that story. One thing that I always like to note is Mrs. Wong's story about carrying all of those things. And her memory of Yat Ping taking on the mooncakes of carrying those, which I think, you know, is a simple object that can really tell a rich story. Maybe Yat Ping, 7 years old, just wanted to carry them because she's 7 and she wanted sweets. She's the oldest child in this family, and she's always going to take on a lot of responsibility, a lot of responsibility in preserving language and translating, and will you know, have the memories of being in Hong Kong, unlike her brothers and sisters. So we'll be able to carry some of that. Yeah, and I think Denzel who's saying, seeing strange looking faces, diversity all of a sudden. That always strikes me too at the end. She's coming from a place where people look the same as her, but in the Lower East Side, you know, she's coming to a place where she's sharing the streets with Puerto Rican migrants, with the descendants of Italian and Jewish immigrants, with African Americans are moving to the city. So she's, you know, experiencing that. And thank you for those of you also sharing. Also an immigrant from Hong Kong, wonderful. Children being resilient. Yeah, and it is a beautiful memory for metaphor for the weight immigrants carry in the decision to migrate. And also she may have faced racism in the classroom as well. Yeah, absolutely. Actually, Kevin Wong tells us a story when he was in elementary school that that was how he got his name Kevin. That's not the name that Mrs. Wong gave him. He tells a story of, you know, just in 5th grade, the teacher giving them a list of names and saying that it would be easier for them if they took an English name, which we always think, you know, easier for who? Yes, absolutely. And thank you, Kuni, for sharing. Thank you for sharing the characters there for Mooncake and to help connect. Yes, and Karen, in this case, it was Mr. Wong that came first, and then the rest of the family, absolutely. Let's try to establish some things and get them set up. So thank you all so much for sharing those thoughts and connections. I'll just share a little bit more about the family before I show you, you know, how you can access these stories in your own teaching in classrooms without visiting the museum. But another important part of this component, actually similar to the Rokushevsky family, is Mrs. Wong's work in the garment industry, as was the work of many Chinese immigrants, especially women, in the 1970s and 1980s. In fact, you can see this statistic on the wall here. 60% of Chinatown families had a member working in a garment shop. So we recreated a garment shop to share a lot of these stories. And we have stories not just of the Wong family, but of other women who worked in this industry to discuss what was difficult about it, but also how it was empowering and how they found community here. And a big motivating factor for Mrs. Wong in doing this work was to send her kids through school. And I can actually share 3 photos here of her with her children graduating from college or high school. I always notice how she has the same red dress on in all 3 of these photographs, which she skillfully made. We've got Yap Ping here, Allison on the bottom, and then in the picture with her youngest, Kevin, she is wearing the cap and looks very relaxed here, like she's done. Here we have the Wong story, and these stories we present on site here, but we also present them virtually too. So I want to share with you our virtual field trips page and just talk a little bit about our virtual field trips. Okay, so just showing you our website here. If you go to tenement.org and go to learn, you can go to the virtual school programs. And currently we are offering a number of programs and are absolutely going to expand the programs that we're offering come this school year. All of our programs are 60 minutes long. They take place on Zoom, though if that's absolutely impossible for you, we can try to work with different platforms. And they are run by a Tenement Museum educator with sort of an assistant to help facilitate interaction. Interaction is really, really important on all of our programs. We really want students to construct the stories with us through watching these oral histories or looking at primary sources, and also, connecting their own experiences and stories to what they're connecting with the families. So we have, of course, the Rokushevsky family story and some other stories here. The Velez family, a family who were migrants from Puerto Rico, the Baldizzi family, who are Italian immigrants in the 1920s. And we also have a program with a costumed interpreter who actually plays a real person who lived in a tenement building in 1916 named Victoria Confino, which is not here yet, but it's coming. And then we also have special workshops for students who are learning English, our ESOL workshops. So we actually have these for 6th through 12 students and adults. And while our regular slate of virtual field trips does have a fee, these are grant funded, so these are free, our virtual shared journeys programs. And the educators on these programs all have training or experience working with English language learners. And they, have some language focus, and they also have more of thematic connections for students, knowing that the students themselves are also newcomers. There's a lot of opportunity to connect through the stories. As you can see, they help students place their own immigration experience within a broader historical and political framework. So if you were interested in inquiring about or booking any of these programs, really the best thing to do is go to the website and fill out the forms that there are links to on the programs. And I'm just, catching up on some of the things that you're sharing here in the chat. Oh, I see this is a really emotional experience for some of us. So thank you for, sharing that and connecting. Right, I understand the hurt that is caused when people tell you your name is too hard. I had teachers telling me this all my life, and also had a teacher who picked a different name for me because it was easier. Thank you for sharing that. And so I have a question here. Are the ESL programs only for NYC schools? I should have just said that. Yes, they are. But we still, the grant funding is for NYC schools, but we can still do the programs. And if you write to us and inquire, we can work with a lot of different budgets. So if you're interested in doing those programs, definitely get in touch. Now I will share a little bit about what resources we have online. Okay, so here's our lesson plans page. Again, if you click learn, you can go to lesson plans where we are here. And as you can see, you can filter by different grade levels, by different types. But I do want to point out to you this upper elementary immigration migration unit plan, which was developed for upper elementary, but I really think that the resource in this could be really flexible for students of different ages. So It includes 13 lesson plans, primary sources, and these nonfiction texts, which actually are these like stories written for different families that we have the apartments recreated for, and then a number of video stories too. So again, you can hear and the stories of the different people that lived in the buildings. So I'll just scroll down to show you, these are all the different lesson plans, but I'll start with the family stories. So you can see each of these is a story, and if you open it, you can download it. So I'll show you actually the Saez Velez family story.
My mother would work a lot.
Oops, I
Believe
didn't
me,
need
a
to
lot.
start that.
And
But there you see, you can have the oral histories there on the page. And the Saez Velez family, they lived in 103 Orchard. They were neighbors of the Wong family. Actually, their son in the family was the super of the building and provided space for the Wong family to move in. And you can download the article here. And so there's some teacher facing guides. There's a guide towards the beginning, and which includes comprehension questions, thinking questions, writing activities, glossary, and then a student facing story where students kind of have like a tour on paper of the family stories with lots of opportunities to connect to the content, to the story of the family. You can see here, we talk about what going to school, the experiences of Jose and Andy Velez going to school, and then some questions for kids to think about. Why do you think many Puerto Rican families wanted their children to keep Spanish and add English as their second language? Do you speak a language other than English? What are some advantages of speaking more than one language? Just to give you a little bit of that to see there. And then with the articles, right, all of the sources connected with the story are on the same page. And if you want to have a lesson to give you some activities or ways to process this information or utilize this article, those are also linked with each of the family stories as well. So here is all of our sources about the families that we tell stories of on site. But now I want to spend some time to think about, our own stories and the stories of our students. So now we'll sort of get started with the Your Story, Our Story project, which many of you may have already looked at. And on this website, we feature object stories. Go to explore here. Actually, over 7,000 object stories at this point, which students and individuals that live in the United States have posted here. And if you click on one of these stories, you can see this one's very short, actually. You can see the story that's associated with it. I'll show you another example here. So actually these stories were done by third graders who were doing an after school program in the Lower East Side. And to add a story, right, you can add your own story by clicking on add story, or you can add a group, a classroom, for example, by clicking add a group here. And these stories can really be about any object. Right, we had the example of the mooncakes, that maybe if the Wong family or if Yat Ping was writing a story, she might write about those mooncakes, but they don't even have to specifically be about immigration or migration or that part of the story. They really are just a way for people to think about how their objects tell their story and connect them to their family and connect them to history. And by looking at a lot of them together, we start to see a fuller story of American identity and experiences and history. So to utilize this web page, we created a guide, which I know you had linked, but I'll just show you here too. So if you click resources for educators, you can download a middle school packet, high school packet, or a college packet that has teacher-facing and student-facing resources for exploring the site, reading the stories, but also writing and developing their own stories as well. One of those activities is called a gallery walk. And with this activity, you could actually print some stories and post them around the classroom and have students read them and make comments on them. And so we're actually going to do that today. We're going to do a little virtual gallery walk of a few different stories that we have selected. And we're going to do that using a Jamboard. So first, I just want to show you the Jamboard to make sure that we all know how to use it. And then we're going to send you a link to a couple of different stories that we can use. So on the Jamboard, we see on each page an object. And to get to the next page, if you go to the top of the Jamboard, just click the next frame, okay? And these all correspond to a story on Your Story, Our Story website. So I'd love for you all, right, to share some ideas that you have as you read these stories. This prompts in the corner. What thoughts does this story prompt about immigration or migration? Okay, do you have a connection? How might your students connect? And you can share with a digital post-it. So to access the digital post-its, if you look on your toolbar to the left here, just click the post-it and you can type inside here. If you type out or click outside of it, it will post. So I'll delete that one, but just to show you how that works. And then, yes, don't hit clear frame. So I see you have the link to the Jamboard, and then also I'm going to share with you a link to the stories together. Hold on, I'm sorry if you see this. So I'm going to actually just give you some time where I won't speak to let the stories speak for themselves, and let you share on the Jamboard. Thank you for sharing the link. I think we all have it now. So let me know if you have any questions in the chat as you're working through this, but otherwise, yeah, please post on the Jamboard. Thank you so much for adding all of your thoughts to these stories here. We can, point out some of the wonderful connections that we're making here, or ideas about bringing them into the classroom. And it just goes to show, how objects and these simple stories about them can really be starters of conversation and thinking and emotional connection. And also the way I liken these Chinese mesh slippers, I'm noticing people connecting them with different cultures and different countries, even though they're called Chinese mesh slippers, right? And the person who wrote this story, right, is from Belize. So it's interesting to see that. And then this story, the Landscape of Thailand, this was actually done in a collaboration between the art department of the school and the student's teacher. And so all of the students, they were actually in Minneapolis, they drew these images of their homelands and created these stories. So when we think about object, it doesn't have to be a literal object, right, that you hold in your hand. You can interpret it differently. You can also create an opportunity for art making with this project too. In this story, everyone is, sort of commenting a lot about these ideas of acculturation or feeling proud of markers of where you come from, and people negotiating and children negotiating what to include and what to let go of, and how they make those decisions. I am moved by his pride. I am too. And I think that this is a great idea. This pink post-it here uses a model for then and now writing prompts. Read object stories from the past, then describe how a story relates to your modern day immigrant experience. So that's a big basis of our shared journeys programs when we would do a tour, but you can absolutely do it with the stories on Your Story, Our Story too. But I think, yeah, this one is really meaningful too, to think about the participation in a democracy and citizenship, and what it's like to study for naturalization. And then we also have the Kamal story. And yeah, we have a great prompt here. I would ask students who might have a similar response to mine, write down questions that you'd like to ask the person who brought this, right? No idea what this is. So that could be a good activity, maybe to write down questions you'd like to ask the person who wrote this story, which can sort of, prompt students to think about how they might ask questions to write their own stories. In the educator resources, there are instructions for doing an interview or an oral history, and that's really a great way to start the object writing process. Maybe the students don't know what object they'd want to write about, and if they do an interview with someone in their family or someone that's important to them, that starts to bring up ideas. And yeah, this story, someone shared adult Latinx students would love this story. Many are undocumented. It might open a space to talk about their inability to return and visit family. Yeah, it could open that. And Cora, the storyteller here, right? She so subtly mentions that in the story that she couldn't go see her grandparents because of their family status. And actually, we did a podcast at the Tenement Museum where we interviewed Cora, and she told her story. Her family status actually has since changed, and she is able to visit Mexico and go between. But in that podcast episode, the podcast is called How to Be American. She goes more in depth into what her childhood was like and how that process was for her, how she experienced that. But the other thing that's really meaningful about this is food too. So many of the stories on Your Story, Our Story are related to food. I see somebody in the blue post-it made that point here. So you're welcome to, to use all of these stories with your students or in another space. You have the link to it. I'm not going to change the link there. And you can also create your own jam boards with stories that you select. If you go to the Your Story, Our Story website, you can search for different stories and put them together, or you could also have students create or select stories to create these activities. Just scan through here to see if there's any other notes we might want to put out. You might want to mention, or if anybody, if you want to share in the chat, if there is a comment that you really liked or wanted to shout out for everybody else. And while you're thinking, I see you. There's a question here if the museum will be available for in-person school trips in the fall. Yeah, I was focusing all on virtual today. It's a great question. Yes, I think so. But they're going to be pretty limited at first. We're really working it out right now. So we really are going to try and do virtual as much as possible for two reasons. One is the pandemic, and the other reason is we are doing a construction project on 97 orchard. And the building won't be available for some time, so we want to make sure that people can visit us virtually as well. And yeah, so I see a request to keep the Jamboard accessible. Can absolutely do that. So that link will still work. So if I do this activity again, I'll use a different Jamboard. Okay, so I think that's come to pretty much the end of my presentation. Thank you all so much for sharing the comments, and I'm glad that so many of you feel that you will be able to incorporate these resources into your teaching. So it's been a pleasure spending the afternoon with you.